Welcome to another video of my Google Forms series. My name is Melissa Druskus and I'm a board certified behavior analyst. Today I'm going to show you how to create 10 trial data forms with Google Forms. In Google Forms, we will go over how to use multiple choice grid questions, how to export data to Excel. In Excel, we will look at how to create an automated graphing system for the data that you get from Google Forms. And to do that, we will use formulas to manipulate data. The practical applications of this are to replace paper data sheets, reduce data entry time, and as an alternative to paid electronic data entry systems. For our 10 trial data form, we are going to go to Google Forms and start with a blank form. If you have not watched my previous video, or if you're not familiar with Google Forms, then I suggest that you do watch that other video that I made, which is called Changing Data Entry with Google Forms. It goes over a lot of the basics about Google Forms, which I'm just going to skim over this time since I've already talked about that. So to get started, we're going to want to include a title, and we're going to want to include our basic information like we did last time, which will include the date, the time, and the therapists. And now that we've put all the basic information in here, we're going to create another section. And this is going to be the data. So for this type of data, we are going to use multiple choice grids. So we're going to add a question and then click on the drop-down and select a multiple choice grid. So here we can put our question or our program that we're going to work on. And then these rows and columns are going to be just like they are in Excel. So remember, going across this way are columns and going down are the rows. So the columns that we want are plus and minus, because those are the two options for each trial. And then the rows going down are going to be the trials 1 through 10. And now that we have that first program set up, we are just going to copy this for all the other programs that we want. And that is all we need to do to create a Google form to actually calculate it for 10 trials for each program. So this wouldn't work very well if you have programs that go up to 20, because that's just going to be a lot of pluses and minuses, a lot of room for error in there. You can also add a section for behavior data, but I don't think that you can just track the behavior data while you're in the form in the session. I think you would still need just a separate piece of paper. You could just do it on a post-it as well to actually track the behavior data. But this will at least get rid of some of the paper and some of the work that you're doing if you do a lot of just 10 trial programs. So I'm going to add a section for behavior data, but that's going to be just like how we did it in the previous video. We have our form created, let's go in and make some responses. So on the first page here, we'll just include all of the basic information. And now here is our trial data. The way the therapist will enter this is they'll go to the program and then just click on either plus or the minus column for each trial that they're doing. And they'll do that across all of the programs. And now I'm going to go through and create a few more responses so we have more to work with when we put this in our Excel form. And now that I have all of those responses entered, let's go back to our data form and look at our spreadsheet. So we have the 3 responses that I inputted, and we are going to want to create a spreadsheet for this now. If you remember from the last video, we have all of this information in here, which is not in the correct way I like to view it. Again, everything is going horizontally, and I like to see it vertically because that is how I have my program graphs set up. So let's do what we did last time and add a sheet. We are going to put equal, transpose, parenthesis, and then we're going to go over here, select everything, close it, and press Shift, Enter. And now we have everything the way it should look. So let's copy this into our program graph and then see how we are going to deal with all of these pluses and minuses. So here we have our program graph with all of the programs in the same order as our Google form. We have respond to name, follow instructions, action tagged, prepositions target 1 and target 2. And then we have no data in here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is add a sheet. So now we have a new sheet right here. I like to put it at the very beginning, and you don't have to name it anything, but I like to name it something so I know what it is, and we can just put input because that's what we're doing. We're just going to input the raw data there. Now let's go over to our spreadsheet and copy all of the information over to here. So I'm going to select this cell right here to select everything. I'm going to hit Control-C to copy it. And then same thing over here, this cell in the middle, and Control-V. It's asking me if it's okay to paste it because it's not the same size, and in this case, yes, that's fine. And while we have everything selected, we can just double-click here and adjust the size of it, so now we can see everything. So as you see, we have all of our dates going across this way, and then we have all of these pluses and minuses right here. So in order to get this into a percentage, we need to use some formulas in Excel so they can calculate the percentage of pluses that are here and then allow it to be inputted into our graph. So first, let's go over some basic Excel information. Terms and formulas that we'll be using. The first thing is a word or symbol in quotation marks. This tells the formula to look for exactly what is within the quotation marks. So if I have a list of words and one of my words is word, having this quotation marks with word in between, it's going to tell the formula to look for exactly that. The next one that we have is the quotation marks with nothing inside. This means that it's a blank cell. So the way we'll be using this is telling the equation if the cell is blank by using these empty quotation marks, then we'll have it do something specific. Another thing that we'll use is NA followed by a closed parentheses. So this tells the cell that data is not available. So this is really important for graphs. So when we graph something and the graph is referencing a formula, if you use the empty quotation marks or something like that to make the cell look empty, the graph is still going to count that as a 0. So we need to use NA with closed parentheses to tell the graph that nothing is in there, to don't graph any data. let's take a look at our formulas. So a lot of this, if you're not familiar with Excel, can look pretty overwhelming, but I promise you it is not that difficult and it is very useful for a wide range of things. So our first formula, which is one of my favorites that I use all the time, is called an if formula. So that says if, and then you have a parenthesis, then you input the criteria with a comma, and then you put what to do if the criteria is true, followed by another comma, and then what to do if the criteria is false. So it's basically saying, if this is true, then follow the true rule. If not, then follow the false rule. So here's an example. If 1 plus 1 equals 2, then you would put yes in the cell. If not, then it would put no in the cell. So typically we're not putting an equation like 1 plus 1 equals 2. We would be referencing other cells in that sheet, and that's what we'll be doing today. The other one is a count if formula. So you do equals count if with a parenthesis, and then you can either have one cell or a cell range that it's looking at, and then the rule. So my example here is count if A1 through A3 is greater than 2. So if all of those had the number 3 in there, then the response back would be 3 because it would have counted 3 cells. If A1 through A3 was numbered 1, 2, and 3, well then you would only have 1 responded because only one of those is greater than 2. So this is just another conditional formula that says if these cells follow this rule, then count them. And we're going to use this to count pluses and minuses, so it'll be really important for that. If you have any questions on these formulas or on Excel, please just respond in the comments or send me an email through my website and I'll be happy to answer them. Also, you can Google a lot of this. This is where I've gotten a lot of my information from. Just if you're not sure how to do something, just Google it, and there are tons of blogs and resources online specifically to help you with Excel. So the first thing we'll want to do is get all of the information for our therapists and the dates entered in here. So you could go over here and copy and paste it every time, or you can put a formula in here to do that for you. So we're going to equal, and now we're going to use an if formula. First, let's see what happens if you don't use the if formula, and then you'll see why it is that I'm using it. So we could just hit equals and this cell right here, because that's the date, and that's all we want. And now we have the date there. You can see that this is going to be date and therapist, which it does not say that there. I'll put that in. That's just normally the format that I do this with. So date and therapist, and right here we have date and therapist. So it's in the same formula that we want it to be, in the same order. And then down here is the time, which I usually include as well. So what we can do in Excel is, let's zoom in. So this little tiny square right here in the corner, you can hover over it and get the crossbars, and you can pull it down, and it's going to pull the rest of the information from here in the same order. You can also do it by pulling it across, and the information that is in these cells next to it will come up over here. And there's the next date. Now these are just formatted as dates because that's what this is up here. So I'm just going to change that to number because that's what it's supposed to be. Now let's go across and have this go all the way across our sheet. Now look at what's happening over here. So we only have 3 sessions entered so far. The rest of these are blank. So they are taking this as a date too, so I'm going to change that. These should just be text. But still, it has all of these blank dates and zeros in here, and I really hate seeing that. I just want to see the information if there is actually a session there. So let's use an if formula to signify that. So I'm just going to delete this. And let's start with equal if, and then we're going to go to our cell that we're talking about, which is this first date right here. So if this cell equals nothing, and that's where we do our double quotation marks, then I want this cell right here to also equal nothing. But if it's not blank, then I want it to tell me what is in this cell. And we're going to close that and press enter. So now we have a date. So again, let's go over that. If this cell is blank, then make this cell blank. But if it's not, then give me the data that is in this cell right here. So that sounds kind of circular when we're talking about it, but we can also see it here. Here's the criteria. This is what to do if it's true, and this is what to do if it's false. So now let's pull that across our cells and see what it looks like. There we go. We do not have any of that ugly stuff on there, so it looks much better. And again, we'll just change the format of this. And you can leave that as text or number. It doesn't really matter right now because we're not using it in another equation. All right, so you would want to pull that all the way across however long your graph is going to be. And now let's get to the more complicated part, the equations for the data. So I'm going to gradually step up to what we eventually want it to look like, just so you can see the process and why we're adding each step on there. Because if I just give you the whole long formula, you might not really understand each part of it. So just thinking about what we want to do, we want to know how many pluses there are in this section, and we want that to be a percentage. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pluses here. So out of 10, that means it's 80%. So I want this cell to say 80%. So we are going to use a count if formula. Count if, and now we're going to include this range right here, because that's the 10 trials for respond to name. And we want to count if those cells equals plus. So count if this range right here equals plus. So it's going to count the number of pluses, and we can press enter, and it says that there are 8 pluses over here, which is correct. That's what we counted as well. Now we don't want it to say 8, we want it to be a percentage. So to turn that into a percentage, we would do 8 divided by 10, because that's how many trials there are. If you have a different number of trials that you regularly do, then you'll want to divide it by that. And we want that, this whole thing, so it's important to include extra parentheses, just like when you're doing regular math to say what to do first and how to group things together. So the number 8, which we got from here, divided by 10 times 100. And that's going to give us 80. I just leave it as 80. I don't do it like 80%. You can if you want to. You would just then want to change your graphs to have these be percentages as well, or else it would just look like 0.8 way down here. All right, so that's how we want that to look. Let's drag that across. And now we have a bunch of zeros. So we know what that's going to do to our graph. It's going to plot a bunch of zeros at the bottom. So we got the number that we want, but let's fix it up a little bit more so we don't have all of these zeros interfering with our graph. So we'll go back to this first cell. And now we're going to add an if formula. So if, parentheses, this cell, which I'm just going to choose the first cell because if you didn't run this program, then the first cell is going to be blank. So there are a variety of ways that you can do it. You can say if this doesn't equal 10, but just to keep it simple, we're just going to go with if this first cell right here is blank, so equals nothing, then, well, we want our cell to equal nothing, right? So equals nothing, and then if it's not blank, we want you to go and do this COUNTIF formula to get us that 80%. So let's see, we still have 80, we move it over, these are all blank, but we still have zeros on here. So why is it doing that? It's doing that because even though these look blank to you, the graph is still picking up on the fact that there is something in that cell because a space is still something, and it's trying to graph that, and it's graphing it as 0. So what we want to change is if this cell is blank, then we don't want it to say nothing. We want to do N, A, and then just a set of parentheses. And what that is going to do, it's going to tell anything that's referencing the cell that there is nothing here, there's nothing in here, it's not a 0, there's just no data. So let's see what that looks like on our graph. It will create hashtag NAs, and that's fine. That's typically what my program graph is filled with, a bunch of hashtag NAs until I input data. So hopefully you're not too distressed by it looking like that, because on your graph it completely fixes the problem. If you ever, let's just type something in here, if you ever want to create a break in your graph or anything like that, see how it connected it? Maybe you changed targets or phases, or there's been some sort of environmental change, then you can just delete this hashtag NA. And now it will create, it won't connect the dots there, it will create a space. But let's fix all that I typed in and go down here. So now to get this going for all of the ones down here, we can drag it down, but we will need to fix the range here. So when you drag across, let's see what it changes. It's referencing B5 and B5 to 14. And now it's C, D, E, because those are the cells that you're going across here. When you drag it down though, it's going to move each one of these down by 1. So B5 will change to B6 and B6 to 15. So those are not the correct cells that we want to reference for following instructions. So we are going to need to change that for each one of these. So you can still drag this first row down, and then we'll go back and fix all of these. So instead of B6, it should be B15. And instead of this, nope, I'm in the wrong one. So instead of this, it should be B15 to 24. So that's a little bit annoying that you have to go through and do that for each program, but remember you only need to do that one time, and then you're just going to drag it across, and then you'll never have to do that again. So let's go through and fix the rest of these. And now for the behavior data, we can do pretty much the same thing, but we're not going to need a count if. We're just going to need the if this cell equals something, then, or if the cell equals nothing, then do hashtag NA, but if it equals something, then put the something in there. So equals if screaming for this cell equals nothing, then NA, and if not, meaning if it does equal something, then put that something in there. And this we can just drag down because they're going to match what's over here. And then same thing, we're going to drag that across. And now we have the hashtag NAs for all of that stuff. So now that all of these are set up, we can just take this and drag this across. And now you have all of the correct percentages. If you go to your graphs, everything is looking good there. And then we have both of our prepositions on this one graph here, except I did not change the label. Alright, so that is how you can create a 10 trial datasheet in Google Forms, and how you can use equations in Excel to calculate the percentages and graph it. So all you should have to do for this, every time you have new data, you can either copy the whole thing over, or you can just add your new data to it. Just remember to never copy over this, because then if we do anything to this data, well, I have to hit delete, then it's going to go away over here as well. So just make sure that you're just always adding to it and never removing this. Now, I actually do not use this. I use Google Forms, but I don't use Google Forms for the trial data. Sometimes I have kids that we see all day long, so they may have up to 20 programs. I don't want my therapists having their phone out trying to enter it like that throughout the whole time, because we do also have kids with aggression and disruption, and that could likely break their phones. So this is not really something that applies to the way that we do therapy, but I think it can be really useful for people that do just stick to those 10 trials if they're working on discrete trial training. So please let me know what you think of this. If you have any questions or problems, please put it in the comments below, and I'd be happy to look at that. And I am interested to know how this actually would work in an applied setting, if it's practical to have your therapist actually entering in the data like this. So yeah, just let me know. I hope that this was helpful for you. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and like me on Facebook so you can stay up to date on other videos that I make. Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to visit my website at www.abcbehaviortx.com. Here you will find resources including templates and other videos, my ABA blog covering a wide range of topics for parents and therapists, as well as information on my other services, including distance supervision and parent consultation.